Nobody's gonna dare push back on this. There's gonna be some critical mass where too many trans women athletes are winning too many events, and it's either just gonna cause people to become way more transphobic, and it's gonna cause a lot of erosion for trans stuff, or people are gonna finally be like, okay, well maybe we need to change something. But the problem is, like, nobody knows where that critical mass is gonna be, like how many trans women need to dominate women events for that to change. And then also continually keeping in line with how society works, nobody gives a fuck about men. But the fact that trans men aren't competitive like anywhere will never be a problem to anybody. Nobody will give a fuck about it at all. So. Hassan's take on trans athletes, oh boy.
And even if trans women, specifically because they are in like the starting process of their transition or whatever, have significant competitive advantages. Let's say they do. In 99% of the instances, they don't. There's plenty of empirical evidence to suggest that they don't. But even if they do, it does not matter. It does not matter because it's not unnatural. It's not unnatural to be trans, unless you think it's unnatural to be trans, in which case you are transphobic. That's it. That's the take.
What? Your arguments on the trans sports panel pissed me off. Every time you compare the strength of men and women, I thought it was stupid and seemed bad faith. It dodges the actual serious question, which is, does HRT attenuate the difference by enough to make things fair? The reason why the conversation has to start here is because most people don't have, most people don't acknowledge this. I think most of the trans community and most people that argue online don't think there's that big of a difference. So I think the conversation has to start with people acknowledging how big the difference is, because I think people just don't understand it. And then from there, you can have a conversation about, like, does HRT or whatever change things? But the reality is like all of the long-term research says no. And even like the most staunch advocates that I was arguing against conceded as much. Like, okay, yeah, it doesn't, but their cop-out was always like, but we need to control for height in all these studies, which is ridiculous because height is one of the big genetic advantages conferred on men from women. If average cis women traits are clustered around here, and then like average cis male traits are clustered around here, it's like you're trying to make this argument that like once people transition, they shift down this curve. Maybe we'll say that they're like at this point, they shift down to below average, whatever the male performance will be, or we can even shift it down more, or we can even shift it down more. Regardless, wherever you shift this curve down at, the distribution is going to be totally fucked, because you're taking a trans woman that can be a wholly average cis male prior to transitioning, and now as a trans woman, just by virtue of being a trans woman, they're already way ahead of 98, 99% of women before we even start to talk about like, well, who's competing in sports, who's doing whatever.
Are we just specifically talking about like height here?
Well, if we want to talk about, the problem is when we try to talk about other things like lean body mass or whatever, you want to throw away all those studies because you say, well, they didn't control for height.
Oh, well, no, I don't want to throw away them. Actually, like with, for example, the one that you posted, the Joanna Harper British Review of 24 Studies. That's actually something that I do like. I do like criticize, like I do have the criticism that doesn't control for height, but like the study itself. The conclusions from the study say that we cannot make any conclusions based on the evidence that we have. Like more research needs to be done, and that research would control for height. Because if you want to talk about the effects of HRT on stuff like lean body mass, stuff like on the stuff that like matters, because again, like lean body mass is one of the biggest factors for like the discrepancy between male and female sports performance. Is that, well, you would want to compare a trans woman to a cis woman who has similar like stats, like
okay, let's say
training
sure.
years, similar height, because then you can see the effect of HRT, and if HRT brings the trans woman's lean body mass down to cis levels or like slightly above, which is
this study seems like it's almost exclusively looking at like bone mass and bone density. That seems like the most important thing that this study was focusing on.
And lean mass, it's both of them.
Wait, is it, or is it just this? It's only talking about appendicular lean mass.
Yes.
That's only appendicular is that's only your arms and legs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what I don't know why I would take that as being more important than like looking at overall like.
Well, because we have very little data on lean mass and such. Like this is just like one example. Like I said, the Harper the Harper review, which is the best review that we have to date, shows that like hemoglobin levels are the same.
Sure.
But that,
yeah. Wait. So
that,
so
and that
some real quick. So some blood
decreases,
stuff can be like
yeah.
very responsive to hormones. I understand that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
I was just going through the
yeah, sure. But hold on. But just
results
focusing. Sure, I know. But just focusing on this one thing, right? So this study looks like that it was taken 3 months, or the study was done 3 months after treatment, right? So 3 months after treatment. Let's think effect size for our study. Are you telling me that this study, after 3 months, saw no difference in lean body mass between trans women and cis women? You know that's not true based on everything else you read, right? So this study was clearly focusing on something else, like bone density is what it's looking at. Otherwise, that affects
bone density and appendicular lean mass. It didn't go for like total.
Sure,
like,
but I'm
lean
just
mass.
saying that like we would never. You shouldn't be citing this to me as an example of how similar they are, trans women and cis women, because the effect here is insane. Again, the average male height is like 5'9.5", and a 5'9.5" male is taller than 98% of women, of cis women. So I mean, like, it's just. But I think it's like one of those arguments. It's like super. I think it's just super obvious. I don't know. I don't think anybody engages in good faith. The whole conversation seems painfully partisan from every party involved. Yeah, because conservatives just want to jump on the other end and dogpile too. So it's just. But I mean, like, I think every conversation on the internet is dog shit because nobody's actually invested in any of these topics. I think that it's just an ability for you to virtue signal. I think that's all they've become. And then if you view it through that lens, like everything kind of makes sense. Right, on the trans side, they want to be as extreme as possible. You know, get like people on that panel were saying ban women's sports.
Who gives a fuck if women can't compete at the top level? If they can't do it, they can't.
I mean, that's essentially what the argument seems to be.
Who watches women's
fucking
sports?
care.
A ranking system based on skill is completely fine, and that you have classes for like the 800 to 1000, the 600 to 799, shit like that. Sounds completely reasonable to me. And if it eliminates women's spaces from sports and makes it so that, I mean, keep in mind it'd be eliminating men's spaces from sports as well. And I have absolutely no issue with that. The turfs are completely right. I do want to actually get rid of gendered spaces in the sports arena, and that they are 100% right. And I don't base my opinions off of what the most radical turfs feared that I'm going to do.
Or like just get rid of women's sports. But then on the conservative side, it's like fuck all trans people. This is all evil, horrible shit anyway. We should never have trans people. So it's like everybody just uses all of these issues, just become like a vehicle through which people can channel whatever virtue signal they want for whether they like or don't like trans people, I guess. Yeah. Are there any trans men in the politics space? I feel like everyone is a trans woman. I think in real life the numbers are a little bit closer, but on the internet you get way more attention for being a woman than you do for being a man. So trans men probably just don't get much attention, even if they are out there. You get way more validation and attention being a woman in these conversations. So one thing that is kind of frustrating is that like it wouldn't surprise me if there's just not like that much research, because all of it is so new. And I think that a lot of the people that advocate for trans athletes to be included with cis athletes of the genders that they identify with kind of like thrive in this gray zone where I feel like a long time ago it was like, show me one trans athlete that's dominating. And then it's like, now it's like, show me 1 million trans athletes that are dominating. And it's like, basically the goalpost has moved to where like, if you can't show that trans athletes are dominating the top of every like women's sport, then it's not a real problem or something. Which I don't know if I buy that explanation. I think there's also like I think there is some fringe work around like researching like oxygen, like lung capacity and bone structure, and then people will go on to say like, oh well, look, there's no research showing that like greater lung capacity or like bigger skeletal muscular structures are going to actually help you athletically. And it's like, man, there might not be the research, but that feels so intuitively wrong. I don't know if I actually believe it, which is maybe a little bit of an anti-scientific thing to say, but like,
Obama, newly dark. What are you talking about, Scrub King?
I think the thing that Jangles might be able to talk with you. Yeah, I saw some of the video. Like, Obama. I don't know, maybe. I think the thing that I have the hardest time. I don't know if Jangles addresses this. The thing that I think is the hardest to address is like the fact that you can train as a biological male through puberty, and then switch over and then compete as a as a woman in like a women's sport, I don't know how you can ever say that that's fair or how you ever overcome that difference. I've never heard a good response to that. Has nobody made theoretical new categories for sports? The problem is that people see the battle as a moral one and they don't really care about the sport itself. So when you suggest a new sport, people aren't really thinking of like, oh, well, is this good for athletic whatever or not? What instead they think is like, oh, you think trans people aren't real women, or you think it's always trans women also. Nobody cares about men ever. Nobody cares about trans men or cis men, okay? So this it's not even trans athletes in sports. We're really only talking about trans women in sports because trans men aren't competitive for the same reasons why trans women are super competitive. There's a reason why, is because you can't, like, if you went through puberty as a female and now you've gotten some HRT and now your hormone profile looks similar to a male, you're not going to be competitive ever. Trans men don't compete with cis men in like any sport, except for there's like two like athletes that people want to link, and they're the only sports where cis women are semi-competitive. And one is like, I'm not even making this
up. You responded to me in chat yesterday until watching the video, but you said I was virtue signaling. But telling you Kat is a woman is a reasonable answer to whether she's non-binary or not. You owe me an apology because I will never recover otherwise. Re.
Cool. Fuck, I don't even remember what I was saying. I don't remember what I was saying.
Obama.
True. Oh, the only things that people are competitive in are like fucking power walking, like that sport that. And then the only sports that women tend to be competitive with men in are endurance sports. So I think that like for ultra marathons and stuff, I think that women get closer to men's times there than they would like in sprinting or something. You say LOL power walking, but apparently it's an Olympic sport. I didn't know it until somebody linked trans athletes to me in a debate one time to own me, and then I looked up like, oh, well, what does this person compete in? And it's power. It's there. I guess I don't know if it was Olympic or not. Was it Olympic? I think it was, but it's called. I don't think it's called power walking. I think it's called race walking, where but one foot has to be on the ground the whole time, and it is Olympic. Okay, yeah, it was. I looked at it. I was like, okay, yeah, I don't think this is helping your argument, Chief. But it's just like the thing is you foster like so much bad will.
Do you think that trans athletes that transition before early in puberty should be allowed to compete in sports with cis athletes?
If you transition before puberty, I think there's stronger arguments for it for sure. But post puberty is really hard. Like, I'm an older person who got into weightlifting seriously as an older person. So I say that, okay, knowing that like, okay, I'm not trying to sound disparaging or anything, all right? You should try the hardest you can in all of your life for everything you do, all right? Always, because it's good to self-improve and all that. However, Tabor will agree with me here. Nobody goes from like being not that involved in sports to being like a D1 athlete. Like, I'm pretty sure that you can pick these people out, if not in middle school, in like the freshman year of high school. Nobody goes from being like, oh, you know, I don't know if I want to try a sport or not, when they're like 20, and then by 22, they're like star players on their college teams. I don't think that happens. So when people are saying things like, oh, well, this person transitioned, you know, when they were like 20 or whatever, and it's like, okay, so what, like, they've already gotten to train a hardcore amount, like, as a different sex. Like, you can't tell me that this person is on the same playing field as everybody else. It just doesn't, there's no way. That's not how that works. Is there any place to put blame the trans females themselves to continue to play these sports while knowing they have an unfair advantage? I don't know if I would saddle the blame on an individual. I mean, if you want to compete and play sports, I mean, like, I can understand the person's desire to do so. I don't know if I would blame the individual. Also, you got to consider these people in some of these sporting events are like, what? How old is the Talia or whatever person? Like 20 or something? Like, am I really gonna say like you have fucked up all these social issues? Like, I wouldn't. I was a fucking moron at 20. I don't know, dude. I don't think I would. Like, fuck it. If the rules say you can compete, then fucking compete, dude. Who cares? Like, fuck everybody else, dude. Hey, if the rules say you can do it, then fucking go for it. That ain't on you. But the basketball rankings in middle school are usually pretty accurate for who's going to be in the NBA. Is that true? Is it really that significant? Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily in middle school, but I know like by freshman year of high school, like you can pick the winners. Is this not sort of comparable to people being popped for PED usage and then allowed back into the sport after some time? They would still have the advantage of training with PED. Yeah, basically, but it's like super, like, male puberty is like a super ultra PED. Another thing that bothers me about this is that puberty as a male is a very important thing to your overall physiology. And to deny that also kind of deny trans people that are pushing for puberty blockers for children. Because if you're telling me that you can erase every major like physiological or biological difference with just some hormone therapy, why do we care so much about preventing people from going through puberty for the wrong sex, right? But that would be that's kind of a hardcore. That would be kind of a hardcore tweet. This Redditor wants to talk about it. Yeah, I don't know. These conversations legitimately going to kill myself. If somebody wants to, I mean, if anybody's around to drag people in, maybe. The answer that aesthetically it's different and it doesn't have much of an effect on sports. I mean, like, how can things like your lung capacity or how can like the structure of your body not have an impact on like athletic events? I don't understand. Or the ability to train basically with performance enhancing drugs for like a decent chunk of your life. How can we possibly say that has no impact on your... Really know that the impact of male puberty from male to female trans women is really that much more of a than the physiological difference between cis women? Almost certainly. But I mean, like, what's gonna happen is because of like the direction of the culture is nobody's gonna dare push back on this, and there's gonna be some critical mass where too many trans women athletes are winning too many events, and it's either just going to cause people to become way more transphobic, and it's going to cause a lot of erosion for trans stuff, or people are going to finally be like, okay, well, maybe we need to change something. But the problem is, like, nobody knows where that critical mass is going to be, like how many trans women need to dominate women events for that to change. And then also continually keeping in line with how society works. Nobody gives a fuck about men. So the fact that trans men aren't competitive, like, anywhere will never be a problem to anybody. Nobody will give a fuck about it at all. So. I did W-T-SLD, and I don't know what W-T-SLD, I don't know what the fuck that means. WTEESLED, and weightlifted in college can confirm the top athlete potential can be seen at 10 or 11? Like age 10 or 11 or grade 10 or 11? I think that for a lot of people, it's just kind of like basic psych stuff. I think that if you have a history of being misunderstood or not seriously engaged with anybody, you probably are a little bit warmer to people that are willing to engage with you seriously. That would be my guess.
Are you
14, 15
chromosomes? Then what's expected?
The only way we can have a bimodal graph is to have two different things that we're studying, right? Where the places where it overlaps don't constitute a new category.
They aren't a new category. There aren't even two categories.
It's males and no, there are. Listen. We have the concept of male. Even if only half of the people on Earth were males and females, we would still have the concept of males and females.
The social concept.
Human males and human females.
If you talk to
hold on.
human biology researchers, I just want to point out, human biological researchers do not, quote, only study two things, males and females. They don't think in terms of males and females. They think in terms of the thousands of genetic variations that humans experience.
Okay, hold on. This is just not true. It is true that things like sex can get very, very, very fuzzy when you start to get like really into the weeds on certain things, like different genetic diseases can make things weird. And then there are different species that will flip some things around, like who mates with who or who gives birth to whatever, or things like there's definitely things around the borders when you get really into it that get very fuzzy that can definitely challenge a hardcore concept of like male and female, as rigid as conservatives would like it. But to say that like, well, researchers don't even think in terms of male or female, that's just absolutely not true. That is, I would be shocked if you found like anybody that studied anything related to anything having to do with biology that didn't like generally think in terms of male or female, unless you're getting into very specific like sex research.
I noticed your title says chilling.
I am chilling.
Does this mean you are actually chilling?
Yeah.
You don't seem very cold. Please clarify. Thank you, bonus meme. Oh, bam, nah.
You'd agree that the solution to the trans question in sports is dependent on the sport itself, right? Maybe. I kind of think you probably should just create like a different, like you have like an open category where everybody could compete, and then you have like a protected cis women category. Probably should be that way for almost every sport. The muscular advantage enjoyed by transgender women is only minimally reduced when testosterone is spread. Yeah, I don't, it feels shitty because like I guess like I can start digging through papers. I've seen a lot of people, but I think there's evidence. There might be equal evidence on both sides of this, or I know there is some evidence on both sides of this. Every time I've watched somebody do like a big review of it, usually it's overwhelmingly in favor of trans women tend to retain some strength from being a cis man. But like if you could ask any professional athlete, like any professional woman athlete, hey, if you had the opportunity to train as a male from the ages of like 13 to 21, like you wouldn't even finish the sentence. They'd be like, yeah, obviously, duh. Wait, what the fuck? Yeah, obviously. Like, it's not even a question. And the idea that like, and then when people say things like, oh, you don't retain anything, like, I don't know what that means. Like, do you think your muscle just melts off? Like it all just falls apart? Like when these people are transitioning, they're still strength training, they're still conditioning, they're still doing like all their other athletic training. The muscle doesn't just go away. It doesn't just disappear, right? And then you get like all of the, benefits of training for a cis person. What about for trans women who transition early, took puberty blockers? If you want to do the puberty blocker thing, that's probably fine. Puberty seems to be the big thing that gives the advantages.